A small group of activist doctors recently launched a campaign to convince Canadians to support a ban on handguns and so-called assault weapons. We should listen to them, right? Doctors are experts in repairing gunshot wounds in those who have suffered them, and they're also experts in working with those people to deal with the ongoing medical and emotional injuries these victims are burdened with. Unfortunately for these activist doctors, the fact is they're in no way experts in law enforcement policy, firearm regulation, firearm operation, storage, paperwork, or the administrative requirements of legal firearm ownership. Dismissing numerous offers of cooperation from qualified experts and dismissing any valid criticism, the doctors rolled out their evidence to support their very specific solution.
Reviewed the international world body of literature recently, and the recent evidence is very clear, The evidence that we have presented is well supported by international level studies in the medical literature, and it is not my assertion. This is information and data that has been replicated in jurisdiction after jurisdiction, in county after county, province after province, country after country. There is now an abundant and irrefutable body of international data and information and study which supports. This is not my assertion. This is the assertion of scientists and doctors and physicians who study this problem.
A reasonable person, especially one who has a trusting relationship with their own doctor, would believe Dr. Ahmed by default. One might also reasonably agree, based on the word of this doctor and her colleagues, that her simplistic solution of having the government ban handguns and so-called assault weapons is unambiguously supported. We'll come back to that in a minute. Meanwhile, the media rushed in to support this somehow overlooked and overwhelming evidence, and they were happy to provide almost 100 media opportunities to disseminate Dr. Ahmed's professional opinion. At the same time, the media responded very aggressively to villainize her critics, many times editorializing and using pejoratives. It seemed like no one was interested in one specific thing: knowing whether or not there were any real evidence, as Dr. Ahmed claimed. After enduring almost a year of this, the members of the Canadian Coalition for Firearm Rights, or the CCFR, hired a full-time researcher to investigate Dr. Ahmed's mountain of evidence. You can find that full report right now at gundebate.ca, but let me give you some highlights. We'll start with one of the worst: the disgraced Canadian pediatrician study, rolled out by the media as a child is injured by a gun every day in Ontario. Well, that might be true if 24-year-olds are children and pellet guns are firearms.
It's called The Risk of Firearm Injuries Among Children and Youth, and the senior author is Dr. Natasha Saunders. It comes out of the group at the Hospital for Sick Children, and it documents that over a 5-year period, 2008 to 2012, there was one child per day injured by a gun in Ontario.
That's what I thought you said. I just wanted to make sure I heard it clearly.
That is correct. That is the reported evidence and the data.
In fact, this literature and how it was sold was so bad, we made an explainer video specifically for this one. There's a link to it in the description box of this video. Next came a myriad of editorials. Editorials are not studies. They're not evidence of anything. But this actually gets worse. In fact, some of the listed references in these editorials were other editorials. Now, the overwhelming majority of the scholarly evidence presented by the activist doctors originated in the United States. So this is entirely irrelevant to our conversation in Canada because the regulatory system here couldn't be more different than in the United States. Even so, there was one paper that was as exhaustive as could be expected. And though it again entirely focused on the United States, a compelling but not conclusive assertion was made, and I'll make it simple for you, that background checks are useful. Even to simply reference the specific literature is absurd because Canada implemented background checks in 1977 and daily background checks in 1995. It's a program called continuous eligibility screening, and it was implemented decades ago. The literature in this series of tweets affords precisely zero evidence that supports Dr. Ahmed's claim that banning handguns or so-called assault weapons will be the answer to even the low levels of firearm-related violence that we have here in Canada. But how could this be? Dr. Ahmed and her group of doctors have made it crystal clear from day one that they should be believed not because they're concerned Canadians, but specifically because they're doctors. Some medical associations have supported this group in its interesting behavior as well, including the embattled Ontario Medical Association, among others. And what about the media's role in this? The media considers the term fake news to be a slur against their community. They exhaustively reject the notion that they use their platforms to intentionally form and support very specific narratives independent of the actual truth of a matter. So in the interest of their unquestionable integrity, I'm sure that the media will spare no amount of effort to reach out to Dr. Ahmed and her colleagues and give them an opportunity to explain why they've diminished the reputation of all doctors by relying on unqualified opinion, editorials, unrelated evidence, and worst of all, absolutely nothing that supports their position on legal licensed firearm ownership. This behavior is one of the primary reasons that the discourse around private firearm ownership has become so toxic, and that Canadians find it so difficult to locate the actual truth. This type of manipulation and division, it's not okay. So if you're tired of this kind of behavior from people who demand your trust and demand your respect, let them know. But before you do, I recommend that you do your research. For more information on this situation, links to all of the studies, and to download the actual report that the CCFR has completed, go to gundebate.ca right now.